everyone, and welcome to another episode of Scary Stories We Tell. I'm your host, Chris Dashew, and I'm joined once again by my good friend, artist, auteur, raconteur, man about town, one of the guys. You're just one of the dudes.
Just one of the dudes, man.
Just one of the guys. Just one of the guys. Just us guys. To the Just Us Guys podcast. What the fuck was it we were going to call it?
Oh, the three dudes. Yeah, because
yeah.
Jess was going to join us.
Yeah, the Three Dudes podcast. Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. Ideas, ferment and ruminate, and, they're not over until we're all dead. My good friend, Maggie the Odd.
Hey, gang.
What a transition.
I like it. Yeah, a little bit of a ramble. It's our MO. We have a solid start. We deteriorate in the middle and then bring it back.
Speaking of deteriorating.
Yes.
Speaking of deterioration.
Welcome to today's episode of Lost Tape Season 2. We are on the episode called Alien.
Yeah.
Not to be mistaken with the movie Alien, but we'll take heavily influence from Alien.
Not to be confused with the episode from next season titled Reptilian, which is also about aliens, maybe. Well, yeah, on this episode of the Lost Tapes Chronicles, where we take a look at Animal Planet's The Lost Tapes, a found footage horror TV show, I would say focusing on cryptids, but this episode really pushes the fucking definition. This episode pushes the definition of what I think this show should even be talking about. On this episode, Maggie, like Maggie mentioned, we are going to be talking about Alien, not the movie. I wish we were talking about the goddamn movie. Directed by Ridley Scott. Let's just talk about that for an hour. Maggie, what in God's name was this episode?
You know what? Okay, so here's the scoop. Have you seen the show The Outer Limits?
I have not.
Okay, so Twilight Zone adjacent, but sure. There is a classic episode about a guy that goes to space and he comes back all fucking weird. He's hallucinating about this creature and it turns out he had alien contact and he brought something back down. Sound familiar?
Right. Welcome
to the episode, guys.
There's an episode of the X-Files that's just like this. Instead of an alien insect, isn't it? It's the face, right? Isn't it the face on Mars or whatever?
Yeah.
Thoroughly shit episode of the X-Files.
Yeah, once again, man, that's for a show ultimately about alien encounters, that was a terrible alien encounter.
But for a show ostensibly not about alien encounters, this episode of Lost Tapes is, I don't want to really belittle the people who made this show, but this episode does not belong in this show.
This was oddly over the top for their approach, which once again, good on them for the Spirit Award, but the story was not great. Once again, reiterating the Outer Limit description. This is another person that went to space and came back, but not pregnant with, because this version of Aliens, they decided to do the thing that Lost Tapes does best, which is take a random animal from nature or a thing from nature and just try and foible it together. So they have like a fungus / parasitic alien as a base.
That came from comet dust.
Yeah.
It's a spore that becomes a bug
that can survive the vacuum of space and then the atmosphere of Earth.
Right. And also, when you're in a spacesuit out in space.
Right. There can't be a leak. You'd notice if you had a leak there.
Correct.
You'd notice pretty immediately.
Correct. So unless Captain Miranda Bach got back into the space shuttle or space station and took her hand, wiped it down her suit and went, why is she being infected with a comet dust parasite? It's
a slow acting until it acts and then it's fast acting alien parasite, not to mention because she has been back on Earth for a minute now because she's talking about the R&R. She gets checked into the hospital. Oh, and that melodramatic freak out where she tries, get this thing out of me. And I'm like, oh, they're doing this?
What fucking you saw John Hurt in Alien and this is what you took away from it? Just like screaming at the top of your lungs.
Hey, man, okay.
I think my issue with just the premise of the episode on the face of it is this is not a cryptid. This is something else entirely. And again, I don't think that discredits or says we shouldn't have had something like this in the show. I'm not saying like, oh, you can't address something that kind of is tangentially associated with cryptids, but the way that they did it is increasingly lazy. It's shockingly lazy, and like you mentioned, it feels like a mixing bowl full of other things we've seen.
Yeah, it's an alien mashup, which is interesting.
I know it wasn't out at the time, but the movie Life with Ryan Reynolds and Jake Gyllenhaal, very similar to this. There is a lot of Alien, the film Alien, in this movie. Also, you could make the case that there's, trying to think of something else. I see that's the thing. It's like so many other things that to name one thing would be to forget all the other things. Because like you said, it is a mashup. It's this really, because there's like this angle of like her body falling apart, which is kind of like The Fly. And then
the makeup work was good. I will give them that. There were a couple pros to this episode that I thought were an interesting move. Like they did actually go through a couple alien encounter stories in the subset, aside from their stretches to try and incorporate Parasite / Animal Planet stuff. They did actually throw in a couple good alien encounter stories in between, which that's
Barney and Betty Hill. They mentioned them.
Yes, which it's good really stuff to propel that.
About fucking nothing to this episode.
No,
but okay.
Because then you go right back to the story. It's one of those episodes where I just cannot look past the camera foibles where it's like, yeah, she's under high security in a hospital, but there is not a camera that is directly against her face. And there is most certainly not a doctor whose sole job is to watch two monitors, one being really close up to her face. And that was just so damn distracting to me.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, again, they wanted you as the audience to see astronaut Miranda Bach. They wanted you to see her falling apart and the alien, because the alien in this episode, again, my assumption, as I would assume yours is the alien is feeding off of her body to grow, and then it expels itself.
Spread, but...
Right. I guess it's like eating her alive to leave to then go and do it again. Again, they're not
also you think like the doctors would have been hit a lot sooner if that were the case. I'm still astounded that it can thrive in the atmosphere that's completely different from the dust of a comet. I don't think the world has that going for it. But
no, and again, to your point, like for a show that is normally very grounded in reality as much as the show wants to be reality.
It stretches, but it does throw out its facts. It has its zoo book quips.
Yeah, but in this episode, for me, this is the first time where I'm just like, this was a stretch. This was way too far. This is where the show has lost me because what creature is this? What is this? You have
a mad fungus, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you have Jersey Devil, White River Monster, werewolves, vampires, Thunderbird, insectoid alien.
So,
and on top of everything else is just a big bug. A really cheap, big, like probably the size of two human hands.
Which,
controlling it.
Let me tell you, that really grinded my gear for the simple fact that a lot of my favorite alien designs are based on insects. There are some really good bug-based alien designs. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I would have been fine if it were just like the shit coming out of her skin during like the first half where it was that spiky, gnarly stuff, because then you're not giving it a face, but you can see like the effects of it, which... because they put so much time and effort in the makeup department for that, I think that was probably the strongest chunk of this whole entire narrative was that deterioration motive. By giving it a more of a face, it fell a bit, not even falling short, it just felt disjointed. It felt like it was a completely different thing that we were exposed to during the first half of this saga.
Well, and that's why I said like The Fly, because you see mm-hmm. the astronaut falling apart, and then all of a sudden it's like, no, there's this giant bug that pops out.
It's like, nah, man, I kind of like the angle that alien reacted more like radiation poisoning. Right. Like that's pretty eerie. I'll give it that. Yeah. For as flat as the rest of it was, I was intrigued by it until they did the big little turnaround, and it's like, oh, cool.
It's just alien. Like, what's weird is it's The Fly until it's just alien. It's mm-hmm. just a very kind of middle of the road story about a creature let loose in a hospital.
Yeah.
And then on top of everything else, the characters in this episode, I feel like, act the stupidest of any of the characters we've seen.
Agreed, man. It's comical, really.
Yeah. By the end of the episode, we're led to believe that the alien that gestated inside of this astronaut killed the astronaut in the process of birthing itself, killed other people, managed to escape, not of its own volition, but because one of the nurses in the hospital literally lets it out.
Yeah.
Which was the thing that they were trying to not do.
I know. I guess my brain kind of filled in the blank that she got infected. And so it was like a parasite hive mind type of thing. But once again, that's giving a lot.
You're doing the show. Yeah, you're doing the show's job for it.
I know.
I just want to believe that they had an idea here that wasn't garbage.
Yeah, it's just they have thrived with simplicity. I do like their harebrained schemes. This one was just not strong enough for that, sadly.
Well, and I guess my other question to you is, since you and I tend to fantasy book these episodes, dude.
We do, bro. We do.
Okay, so say we have to have an alien episode of this show. That's a non-negotiable. Discovery or Animal Planet or Scripps Network says you have to do an alien.
I already know what I would do.
What are you doing, Maggie? Because what they did...
The Grinning Man. That is some spooky nonsense that you can kind of take and put in a good environment where it can still be ambiguous, but still be effective. Because the Grinning Man sightings, it is literally that. It's just you're in the middle of nowhere and it's night and you see this person with an ungodly, well, humanoid, I should say, with this ungodly large smile. And it just locks in onto your eyes. And that's it. Like, it's ambiguous. It's simple. I mean, yeah, it's not like we went to space, but it's like, why do you need to go to space? There's so many terribly frightening alien encounter stories that are terrestrial. Like, and I think
aren't all alien encounters more or less terrestrial?
Unless it's actual accounts from like people who have been in space or have had,
which is like
seeing shit through telescopes and stuff. It's a very niche audience, I will say. Yes,
it's like use the term few and far between might be even stretching it. Because again, like the amount of people that have been up in space is nowhere near as many people as are on Earth who have seen all of these encounters. Again, like you said, they mentioned Betty and Barney Hill. You know what I would have done? This is what I would have done. I would have just ripped off this. I would have ripped off Communion. Why not just rip off Communion and have it's a guy and his family in a cabin in the woods and strange things start happening and you have a shot of him pointing the camera at the door and you see the little hand.
Yeah.
And come
then
on.
You have several accounts that are very, very similar. Like, oh God, that's terrible. I'm never going to remember any of these names, but there are several accounts of people who have been swarmed by creatures that they assume are alien because they don't have any traces of how they entered the area or exited the area for that matter. There's plenty of those accounts. And I mean, they seem to be huge fans of houses and woods anyway. Why not two birds, one stone?
Cough, cough, Jersey Devil, cough, cough.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, there's that. It's just one of those things where in the spirit of cryptids, I always felt that the Grinning Man was like the closest alien encounter type of thing without taking place in space. I do appreciate they tried for the aftermath of going to space, but without any scientific backing or anything more significant, it's just pretty flimsy. But yeah, the terrestrial encounters of aliens, I was expecting them to go way ham and be like, this is an Area 51 tape. And it's like, because I'm sure they'd be crazy enough to do that.
That would have been more interesting than this. Again, you could adapt Whitley Strieber's story. You could adapt Travis Walton and the Fire in the Sky story.
Absolutely.
You could even adapt Barney and Betty Hill's story.
And all of that stuff still creeps me the shit out. Like,
why mention it if you're just going to have this really, throwing it out here, bullshit alien episode? It's a fucking bullshit episode.
Yeah,
if you're going to do aliens in a show like this, it has to be this kind of alien. Essentially, it has to be a gray.
tangible.
Yeah, it has to be a gray or something that is recognizable to
Or
people
just
who
as an
are
entity.
something that, again, that has, if this show has spent so much time trying to convince us of all these sentient cryptids like the Jersey Devil and all these cryptids with agency and they're doing things and they're not just wild animals, you're telling me you're not going to include the cryptid of cryptids or the metaphysical creature of metaphysical creatures with agency, which is aliens? You're not going to include those. You're not going to go to the well of grays and big almond eyes and small noses and like line mouths. Like I don't get it. I really don't, because again, for a show that
choice.
Well, for a show that tends to go the easy route, they really chose not to this time. And I would have
whether
said,
they
like,
thought it'd be too cheesy or too whatever. I don't know.
Have they watched other episodes of this show?
I know, right? This is creme de la creme, Chris. I thought we were at the Ritz-Carlton here for viewing matters. But I don't know, either between that or I don't necessarily mind the design or route for their alien, but I would hope that they would compensate it by really pulling out the Ranger Rick articles and finding a more substantial connection to what it could be. Or if there were more accounts of like people coming from space with like some sort of sickness and had to go to the hospital. It was so disconnected from anything that could be looped around to like either rumor, hearsay, witness accounts, or whatever, that it just seemed quite a strange take on it. They just wanted to mention parasites apparently and then move on with their lives.
Because cordyceps are freaky.
Whoa. Yeah, wow.
Cordyceps are freaky. Like fungi that takes over your body. I mean, that's the last.
Fucking genius, man. I still remember, speaking of Ranger Rick, the Ranger Rick where they had a picture of a freaking weevil that had a fungus that was controlling its brain. Like, that's creepy shit. Yeah. But you could have leaned into that rather than just pinning it on space dust fungus.
Yeah, I think for me, there's a nugget of an interesting idea here. But to have we're going to do this alien story, but then it quickly is not aliens anymore, I think it's so lame, because it feels like and you've mentioned this kind of already, they wanted to have it both ways. They wanted it to be aliens, but not the kind of aliens that you've seen before. But again, I would contend, just do fucking aliens. Like,
pick a lane. Just pick a lane. It could have gone either way, and I would have been just as fine with it. Like,
they don't do aliens again for the rest of the show. Reptilians,
that's
aliens. Yeah. That's as close as we'll get again. But this is the alien episode, and instead of just doing aliens,
just doing it counts. Honestly, this could have been like a whole entire cluster of just alien accounts where it's like, oh well, we have plenty of lost tapes for this topic. Here's a few, and then just kind of do a smattering of it. I mean, I know that's not quite in theme with it, but would have been a bit easier to navigate, I think.
But that's the thing for me, is like you've said, like this show, we've seen that this show kind of picks and chooses things from a shelf of cryptids, right?
Yeah.
What's weird is that in this episode, they chose nothing from the alien milieu. They literally said, how can we ground this in reality?
Really, they didn't even pick it from the cryptid milieu either.
No, it's cordyceps. I mean, it's literally cordyceps made flesh, because the creature escapes at the end and has agency of its own. Again, the alien stories that I'm familiar with, hell, the alien stories that they fucking point out in this episode, are not this. No alien stories are like this. If this was an alien story that people had frame of reference for, people would not disregard the existence of aliens, because this would be hard to discount. A creature birthed from your body, leaving your body, and having agency of its own to leave. That is not a story in any cryptid lore for aliens that I can remember. I mean, you talk all about people getting things put in them, being tested on them, but things leaving your body would be like, that would be proof positive of some sort of extraterrestrial or outside intervention of some kind.
Unless it was the 1700s.
Again, there are so many avenues they could have gone here. And it's just, the avenue that they went is somehow at times the least exciting and least interesting, and also the most mind-numbingly idiotic.
Yeah, it's almost like the overcomplicated descent setup. It truly did. Just once again, I wouldn't have been pissed if it was just mushrooms the whole time. That's fine. That's creepy as hell, but it's not necessarily a cryptid, guy.
No, it's not even necessarily a cryptid. It's what they've presented in this episode is not a cryptid. It's not even an alien. It's a parasite.
A nice, fun story that they made up, and good for them for that. But
past that, this might be the first episode of the show where I say like this episode offers nothing, and it stands out as a complete misstep. And I mean, even the episodes that have been bad, with like the centipede being kind of hokey, or the Thunderbird.
I can't get past the Iraqi vampire women. I think
right.
That was probably the lowest point.
He's doing something interesting. At least it did something novel. This episode didn't even do anything novel. We've mentioned 3 other things that it is just like, but somehow worse than.
Yeah.
An Exiles episode that's garbage. A movie with Ryan Reynolds and Jake Gyllenhaal that's not great. This is almost also Venom in a lot of ways. Like it's
yeah, a bit.
Again, like black gooish creature flying around and doing things. Like my mind goes certain places almost unintentionally, and it's just that's the way it is with stuff like this. It's just you can't help but draw conclusions and examples to things that are much better, because there are plenty of things better than this episode.
Yeah, yep.
This is a really just alien, huh? Like alien, just okay.
It was an interesting take. They could have dug a little bit deep. Once again, the grinning man is like an urban legend. Like I'm almost astounded that one, it wouldn't have been like, if they didn't do straight up aliens, why not just do the grinning man as like a fallback idea? There's plenty of options for cryptids, urban legends, and what have you that you could connect to animal encounters or whatever. It's just a strange choice to be like, oh, and then aliens. What creatures could aliens be? And then you're like, well, I mean, they're alien. So, and it's like, okay.
Yeah.
So they had to fill in quite a few blanks on the ticket to reach the quota of what qualifies as a cryptid episode that can then be related to animal facts. It's an odd pigeonhole that they have been trying to run for so long. So
yeah, I don't understand why they were like, we need to connect this to parasites. Like aliens should have been enough. Just it is enough. Aliens is enough. Like
yeah, I am glad that they didn't do the I have a baby alien in me, because as soon as she did the whole dramatic scene of get this out of me, I was afraid that that's exactly what it was going to be. So at least it wasn't that. I was at least relieved that it wasn't that, but it still isn't quite.
It's not much. It's not much better. It's not much better in execution.
Yeah, sadly, this was one of the passable episodes where it's like, I don't need to see that ever again in my life.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. This has been one of the few episodes of this show where I'm like, yep, this is just a complete mess. And
yeah, kudos to the people who put in the last second time and effort for, but. So
not good.
No, I can't. Like, however much money they dumped in an episode for this, like they better have paid the makeup artist the grand royals on that one, because that was the saving grace of the episode that made it like, but that was about it.
Yeah, no, the makeup effects are really good, and that's it. Like you're right.
Yeah,
like it's the list of things that are worth your time in this episode start and stop with the makeup effects. That's it.
Correct. Just skip 5 minutes in, watch about 5 minutes, and then skip on out.
And just turn it off, because you're
good.
You're just going to get frustrated with how stupid the characters are. They're in a room, then they're not in a room, then they're running, and then they're not running. It's like, just make up your fucking mind.
It's like when a kid's telling you a story and you guess like where it's going, and then they get a little frustrated and they're like, well, no, it wasn't that. And so they have to make something up on the fly. It's
but yes, it is that. But yes, it is.
But it was, though. Your mom's right here. I can ask her what happened. So you have to loop back to the reality at some point, kid.
Yeah, this is just... You know what? There had to be a clunker this season, and this really is.
That hit it. That pretty much hit it.
Yeah, this
we're almost through on season 2, so
Yep. Yeah, we're closing in on the end of season 2. So on that note, on the next episode, we are going to be talking about the 9th episode of season 2, which is the Bear Lake Monster. Once again, a creature in a lake.
Here's hoping for the home team.
I have watched it, and I will have to rewatch it. I don't remember much.
Well, that's a great sign.
I mean, we've already kind of spoke to in this show where the failures and strengths are, and their strengths do not inhabit the water or flying creature column.
Yeah, the aquatics ain't so hot, but
no, the aquatics are worse than anything else we've seen.
That's
go listen to our White River Monster episode where we essentially posit that this show just could have been doing anything in the water and it didn't matter what it was. Yeah.
Right.
And there's a distinct possibility that this next coming episode will be very much the same. Yeah. We're just going to put all the signifying information that helps you understand where this is taking place in the narration, so it could take place anywhere and we don't even care. We're in Bear Lake. Right? Definitely not the fucking White River Monster, possibly, or the Oklahoma Octopus, possibly. It's like, yeah, guys, come on.
Oh my god!
I'm going to keep an eye out when I rewatch the episode to see if they do that again, where it's like the characters in the episode don't say anything like, "Oh, we're in."
Oh yeah, Bear Lake.
Yeah, I don't. Like I said, I watched the episode, but I don't remember. But when I rewatch it, I'm going to keep that at the front of my mind of like, does the show really just make these episodes?
You guys,
we're emotionless. Yeah. But until then, Maggie, where can people find me?
You can find me in the confines of my museum, dolanmuseum.com, with a bunch of wacky illustrations and other hootenannies and hollers. I also have an Instagram at Maggie the Odd and a TikTok at Dolan the Odd. Because fuck it, I don't want just one name. Give me all the names.
Hey, there you go. As long as you're giving them to yourself, nobody can take them away from you.
True, they're not tangible. Also, so take that, suckers.
Yeah. As for me, cstachiw.com, cstachiw.com. That's my link tree to all the things that I work on, which is a large and varied amount of things. As for this show, Maggie the Odd and Dustin Rutledge do the album artwork, so I get to thank Maggie in person once again, like I do on every single one of these episodes. So Maggie,
always appreciated
for the album artwork. And yet, you have no idea how much I appreciate it because the album artwork's great. It sets us apart from all the other ones that are just made on Photoshop.
Ta-da! Well, I can't function technology, so joke's on that.
Canva, everybody. Yeah, no, I'm with you. And as always, big thanks to our friend Alex Malmack of Blondo for the music. You can find him on Spotify. Just search Blondo. And we'll let our good friend, the former host of Sightings, Mr. Tim White, lead us out.
No mystery is closed to an open mind.